Hello and welcome to this taste challenge, nighttime taste challenge, because it's not going to be dawn for a while. This is Bellows Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. So I just yesterday finished a very difficult uh, American Blended Whiskey Taste Challenge series tournament, which was very difficult, tough to win. Bottled by Bellows and Company. Okay, because those American blended whiskeys are so similar one to another. And the one I was doing, challenging the well made was just so close to the rest. So I did finish up with 9 wins and 6 losses. So that wasn't too bad, 60% considering the circumstances. Hopefully I'll do better with bourbon, but that can be tough too. So this is mellowed 4 years in oak barrels, which is all whiskey has to be mellowed or aged or whatever term you want to use, rested in oak barrels. Okay, that's not really something that's necessary to put on the bottle, honestly. A name of honor established in 1830, and that's a real date. Oh, yes, and they have to be new charred oak barrels. New, the barrel can never have been used before, and it has to be charred. There's no exceptions. There's no, well, but sometimes sometimes it has to be. Now, in the background of this, there's a yellow pen and ink drawing, I guess you call it an etching. Maybe it's an etching of an old distillery, which was never owned by Bellows because Bellows never owned distilleries. But there you go. It's got a B and then a cursive B. All right. Strange way to do it. And then some of them show a B. Some of the labels, depending on the product, will have a honey bee, B for Bellows, get it, B. Bottle's almost gone. This was $5.99 for this liter bottle, $5.99 at Savannah discount. An amazing product purchase. No, it's not a top shelf bourbon by any means, but the normal price is not $5.99 for a liter, okay? When I was at Savannah discount, it was 2019, 5 years ago. That's why there's hardly any left. I saw this on the shelf. Oh, no. Yeah. And a guy, one of the workers there, employees, he says, "Hey, boss, you want to buy this?" I said, "No, I've had that already." But I thought it was Bellows American blended whiskey. But something in my mind was like, go look at that bottle again. It's like caught my eye and I didn't process it. So I went back and looked at the bottle and I said, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. I said, I've not had this one. So I brought it, but they didn't have a tag. Sometimes they don't have tags there, but usually they do, but occasionally they don't. So I brought it to the counter and I said, well, how much is this? And the lady rang it up, price check, $5.99. I said, thank you. And I held it like that. I'm like, I'm buying this one, buying this one. And I think I bought a couple of other things there. I don't remember. They have some strange flavored beers sometimes, whatever. All right. So this is a real date. 1830. It's not one of those pretend dates like you see with other products like Henry McKenna since 1855. Yeah, there was a guy, Henry McKenna from Ireland in 1855. I believe he came to America as an immigrant legally. And he started a bourbon company. But Henry McKenna had no relationship to the current brand that's on the market today, Henry McKenna Kentucky Straight Bourbon, and their 10-year age, the famous 10-year age white label, which I've not had. Because what these liquor companies do, they'll dredge up some old name from somebody who is involved in the whiskey business, but then they'll put their name on a label as though it's been made since 1783. Evan Williams, 1783. Yeah, well, same story, but that Evan Williams trademark. The trademark for Evan Williams wasn't since 1955 when it first was adopted, and I don't think they even introduced it until a little bit later, 57. I don't know why they would. Maybe they knew they were coming out with it, but it said first used 1955, so they might have had some pre-release limited testing. Although I like Edmund Williams, but it's that kind of story. But this is authentic. There really was a Bellows company, been around since 1830. Okay, they got bought out because that's what happens in the liquor, wine, and beer industry. They get bought up. But and I think I think Seagram's had it because they used to do that. They buy all these obscure brands. Although Bellows wasn't really obscure. And then Seagram's decided. I say Seagram's really wasn't the Seagram's family. They had sold out in the 1920s, but the current family at the time decided to get out of the liquor business, and they slowly started selling off their brands and later their distilleries and all their, as William Kepley calls it, intellectual properties, which is the correct term. And Bellows was sold to Beam Company, James B. Beam Distilling. They had it for a number of years, and then they decided to sell it off to Luxco, and I think it was 2015. Why did they do that? I don't know. Just figured they had too many brands, whatever. All right. But Bellows was never a distillery. They were a wine merchant, a whiskey and wine merchant. So you might find old bottles of Bellows wine, or Bellows gin, or Bellows vodka, or Bellows rum, or Bellows brandy, or Bellows American blended whiskey, or Bellows, right, like here, bourbon, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. All Bellows ever did was contract out to people and get their whiskey. And I don't even think they blended it or even bottled it. They just handled it. And then they'd say, make it like this. And then they'd sell it under their name. And it was an office in New York City is what it was. But it was a real company, and they had been around that long. Right. And then just the company got bought. Probably not even the office probably wasn't bought because it was probably leased it from some, office building. Okay. But that's not that unusual. Johnny Walker, look, you say, I'm going to go tour the Johnny Walker distillery. I bet you're not, because there is none. That's all Johnny Walker ever was. They might have a blending headquarters because they are blenders. They buy whiskey from various distilleries and they simply blend it according to their desired specifications, and then they bottle it. I guess they have their own bottling plant, or they might pay somebody to bottle it. Or Diageo owns a bottling plant and then they sell it. Okay, that's just frankly what happens. You've probably heard of J&B, Juster and Brooks. Same story. Never owned a distillery. I've been in front of the office, but it was closed when I was in London last year. I wanted to go inside, but it was closed. It was after dark. Business hours. They closed around 6 p.m. But they J&B, Juster and Brooks, they don't make liquor. They own liquor that they buy from other people, and they market it and sell it. Okay, enough of that. But this is another example right here. WD Liquors. It says right there, WD Liquors. Winn-Dixie, well, on the top says WD, I think. Liquors, quality guaranteed. Yes, they will give you a refund if it's not good. And it's got a wax seal, says WD, but it's really not wax. It's just paper made to look like it. And there's a horse with a jockey. Genuine Kentucky bourbon whiskeys. This is genuine whiskey. In other words, it's not fake. Well, that's nice to know. Bottled in Kentucky. Distilled in Kentucky and bottled there. Well, of course, if it's Kentucky bourbon whiskey, by law, it has to be distilled in Kentucky. So that's a redundant statement. It's like all these Canadian whiskeys. It'll say Canadian whiskey produced in Canada. Yeah, well, that's the only place it is allowed to be produced. And those bottles will say it like 5 times in a bottle. Canadian produced in Canada, under the supervision of the Canadian government. Bottled in Canada, a Canadian product. It's from Canada. It's like, okay, we get it. And then they'll have a maple leaf every 4 or 5 inches down the bottle. I'm trying to get this to focus. Come on, man. As long as I can remember, and I can remember pretty well, I have a good memory. I guess that's why I taught history. Good long-term memory. My short-term memory is questionable. But gold with red and black. There you go. But I can remember with some drop shadow red behind it, make it look 3D. I can remember this as a little kid, family parties for whatever purpose, usually family reunion or Christmas party, whatever. People in my family would buy these Winn-Dixie liquors. Why? Because it was awesome. No, my family, they never cared about it. Stuff was awesome. They just bought it because it was cheap. Okay. It was like the cheapest liquor you could buy, or you could go to K&B, Cats and Best Off. Cats and Best Off had their own line. I think that was made by Heaven Hill. These are made by Wide World Importers, bottled in Frankfort, Kentucky. That'll tip you off of who's making it. Aged 3 years. If you go on that distillery tour in Frankfort, Kentucky, you're not going to see this. This is probably done at night when the tourists are not around. Probably all their contract stuff. But this could go back to 1955 because that's an old practice of private label for grocery chains. In Louisiana, grocery stores sell liquor, all right, if they want to, unless there's a local ordinance doesn't allow it, like in Shreveport, Bossier Parish, Caddo Parish. They're not allowed to sell. You have to go to a liquor store. That's a local regulation. It's not state law. So there's no local regulations in the New Orleans area that I'm aware of. Maybe it used to be in St. Bernard Parish, but so where I live, all the grocery stores sell liquor. Convenience store, every gas station, convenience store, pretty much sell liquor. So that's why we don't have liquor stores. They can't make it. You go to Walmart and they got a whole liquor section. They call it adult beverages. So somebody tried to open a liquor store here. Well, they have done it over the years, but they never make it. They don't make it. They fail. John Schmidt says, thoughts on the North Carolina hurricane? Or the one that passed through North Carolina in the western part? Yeah, it was terrible. Really bad. That's my thought. It was terrible, They never thought, you figure we're inland, we're away from the storm. So, but you got to take into account all that rain, you see. The hurricanes, the rain can be so bad. As we found out in my town here, 12 years ago, flooded like half the town. I think half the houses, or at least 40%, got water in them. Mostly toward the lake where it's low. That's why they're building this levee, which is probably a bad idea ultimately. These levees are always a bad idea, but I don't want to get into that right now. But that hurricane was only a category 1. I'm talking about Isaac, but it got stuck here for 24 hours. It never moved. I thought, well, it's going to pass through, be no problem, and then it just kept turning right above us. And I'm thinking to myself, this is really bad because it's not moving. And I went driving around during the hurricane because, like I said, the wind wasn't really too bad. And I don't think too many people had wind damage of any kind of important level. But I saw that water going across interstate, U.S. Highway 61. The interstate was probably underwater, was going across it like a little river. And I said, man, this is, if it's flooding here, which is getting higher toward the river, because I live close to the river, about a mile from the river, so we get higher land here. I said, I don't know what's going to happen in the back. I say the back, toward the lake. And I know what happened. We know what happened. The water came in at people's houses and caused all kind of damage. So it was same in North Carolina. That storm just started going slow. And they already had water down there on the ground from previous rain. It was unrelated to the hurricane. And they said, rain feeds a hurricane. It stays strong because of the rain. Now, if it had been dry with no water on the ground, that friction from the dry ground would have killed it off. But it was one of those, like they say, perfect storm, or in their people's case, imperfect storm. All right. So it's clear copper. Clear copper, a little darker here, a little darker. Actually, these are more like amber. I'm saying copper, but they're more like amber, darker amber, and just straight amber. As you can see, the Bellows is gone because that's it. I've done so many taste challenges with it that eventually had to run out, and today is the day. Now, have I been satisfied with it? Yes, I have been. Is it a remarkable bourbon whiskey that you really need to look for? No. It's just a regular old standard bourbon whiskey, which means it's probably in the most excellent range. Probably score A. Bourbons will score an A just being there. That's how high the level is of American bourbon production. The bad bourbons are good. Is there another hurricane going towards Florida right now? Yes. Hurricane Milton Obote. Hurricane Milton Obote. All right. And it's a category 5 at this time, but it won't stay that strong. They can't maintain that strength going all the way across the Gulf. So they'll kind of, and this is what I'm hoping, it'll burn itself out. Katrina did that. It was a 5. By the time it hit New Orleans, it was only, we use that term loosely, only a 3, which is terrible. But it was the way it was turning when it hit the city, just east of the city, that it pushed all the water from the northeast into the city and knocked down the flood walls. Because if you remember, the wind damage from Katrina wasn't particularly bad. And after the storm passed, about 9:30 in the morning, the mayor of New Orleans said, we dodged the bullet. That was the general impression. We dodged the bullet. People were out in their yards cleaning up, looking around like, it wasn't too bad. But then people started seeing water coming up, which is very strange. After the hurricane, water will recede, but it was going up. And they were like, why is the water rising? And then they investigated the flood wall by the 17th Street Canal had collapsed from the water pressure. The water pressure went all the way up to the top of the canal and busted the wall. Well, that's all it took, one leak. And they tried dumping sandbags and from the air with helicopter, pushed that up right out the way. All it took was one, and the whole city filled up like a bowl, 80% of the city. But then some other flood walls had broken too. By London Street Canal, I believe it was. But it didn't matter. All it needed was one. One goes down, it's filling. And it filled. And the lower part of New Orleans, lower down the river, it flooded because of the storm surge, pushing the water in from the lake, the Gulf of Mexico into the city. And then that went right down, but it didn't matter because it went up 12 feet. So it was above the roofs, went down, and houses are full of mud and everything. My aunt and uncle's house was totally destroyed. But luckily they had left. Remarkably, the west side of the Mississippi River, New Orleans, because New Orleans is on both sides of the river, on the west side of the city, there was practically no damage, no flooding at all. Never even lost electricity or phone service. They never lost electricity. So right after the storm, they were watching on TV all this disaster. It was amazing. What was your worst hurricane experience in Louisiana, Ron? Says Briscoe. 3 years ago, Ida. That was bad. Oh, that was bad. That was the worst. There's a man that lives down the street. He said, I was here in this house during Betsy, which was always talked about the worst storm. He said, I was here for Betsy, which blew down St. Joan of St. Peter Church, blew down St. Hubert Church. Big building, but probably tornadoes blew them out. And all kind of other buildings. He said, but this was worse. This was worse. He would know. He was there. And that was scary. And I stayed in this house the whole time. I thought the house was going to blow down. So that was scary, I think 5 houses in this neighborhood that I'm in they demolished them after the storm. They were beyond repair. So they just tore them down. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 empty lots. I don't know what they're going to build there, but the houses are going. People in West North Carolina weren't expecting it to be that bad. Neither were anybody else outside of the area. What's the win-loss ratio now? I have a half bottle of Black Velvet left from last week. Oh, well, that series is over, Wesley. So the win-loss ratio was 9 wins, 6 losses. Not too bad. 3-2, 3 wins for every 2 losses. Well, you know, could have been better, but that was a tough one. All right, here we go. Let me mix them up a little bit more. So yeah, hurricane, scary stuff. And like some people say, category 1, that's nothing. Really? Like my friend Jock said, get on the interstate and go 74 miles an hour and get somebody else to stand up on the hood and see how well they can stand up with the wind blowing on. And tell me it's not bad. And remember, that's sustained winds. That's not gusts. Those are much worse. 74 is what it's just doing, regular. That's the spin. And then it'll whip up. So if you think it's not bad, go drive down somewhere when they're having a category 1. Go right to the shore and see how bad it is. Isn't. Bet you'll change your mind. Okay. Yeah, sweet corn. Yeah, sweet corn. What do you expect? That's what bourbon is. It's mostly corn. Has to be. Got it. Not a bad turnaround. I think it was successful, honestly. Well, of course it was successful. It was 9 wins, 6 losses. Just wasn't great. All right. Aroma is yeah, about the same here. One is a little more a little charred oak here. My right hand, a little bit more charred oak. I don't know why the WD doesn't say, oh, the web, I forgot. Let's show the websites real quick. Isn't much to see, but then I'll turn the lamp. So here's Bellows. Meet the family. Bellows is now part of the Luxco family for the last 9 years. And it says the Bellows family. There's the same bottle I've got, except that one's full of liquor. Mine's empty. No more bourbon in it. The product line includes vodka, gin, bourbon, and blends. Scotch and rum. And it's blended Scotch, so that's a blend. There's no Bellows single, not to my knowledge. Okay, so there you go. Winn-Dixie bourbon. You get a huge, which is the only size I've ever seen, for $15.99 November 3rd. And they've been running that since August. You can in the store. No, you know, curbside pickup or anything. They're a little bit more, you know, touchy about liquor. They're not going to bring it to your car or deliver it to your house. But you can go to the store and buy it, which is very easy because it's easy to shop at Winn-Dixie. There you go. That's all they've got. One. There's no single barrel, no small batch, no barrel proof or anything. Just basic bourbon. And I don't understand why it's not called straight bourbon. Now, if somebody watching can explain that, I'd appreciate it. All it says is bourbon. It doesn't say straight bourbon, but it's aged 3 years, which is a year longer than the minimum. The minimum is 2. You only have to age it 2 years to be a straight bourbon. A lot of people will say 4, but that isn't. So, but it's age 3, so I don't get it. Can't explain it. It's all from Kentucky, so it's not that they violated the taking stuff from another state rule. Can you make bourbon out of bourbon whiskey from other states? Yeah, that's not a law. That's not a. It's just you can't call it straight bourbon. It has to all be from the same state. They don't have to be from the same distillery. So I don't know. I don't get it. Can't figure it out. Can't explain it. But that's the story. And one more thing, people will sometimes say that bourbon has to be aged at least 2 years. That isn't true. Bourbon doesn't have to be aged any specific amount of time. Oh, there's that refrigerator. Hold on. Oh, good. It didn't squeal long. Winn-Dixie got bourbon right there on the shelf today. That's aged 6 months. I'm not making a joke. It's aged 6 months. It's bourbon, not straight bourbon, but it's bourbon. And that's the yellowest looking stuff. Got hardly any color to it. But now, if it's any good, I don't know. I'm not paying the price they want to find out. Bourbon has to come from Kentucky. No. Kentucky bourbon has to come from Kentucky. Bourbon can come from any American state. Usually does come from Kentucky because that's a big bourbon producer, but it doesn't have to come from Kentucky. I got in an argument with a lady at a store one time. She was telling me, I'm buying this bourbon for my son. He loves bourbon. I said, oh, okay. And then she says, and you know, bourbon has to be made in Kentucky. I said, no, it doesn't. But then she got angry. Yes, it does. I said, no, it could be made in any American state. And she tells me, you're wrong. I said, I'm not wrong. And, you know, I don't like to argue with people like that, but if you're just going to flat tell me I'm wrong, I'm going to back it up. And I said, would you like me to give you the government regulation source where you can investigate that on your own? And she said, I don't want to listen to this. Okay, I dropped it. You don't want to listen to it, but I know I'm right. So yeah. It wasn't to show her up. It was just I was trying to help her, and then she got indignant, started throwing up, I'm wrong. And I was like, nope. Taste time. People like that don't want to hear facts. Hey, don't even start talking about World War II. You really see people flip their lid. Be all angry, don't know what they're talking about, you know. And then they'll try to throw up like things that are unrelated to the argument, like, oh, I was in the military. Were you? And I'm like, no, because I tried to join and they told me no, because I had a health issue. My skin, they said my skin cut too easily. I had a skin what's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And they told me no. I said, well, I couldn't demand that they let me join. So that was his argument. Since you weren't in the military, it's like I wasn't in the military, so I can't argue about World War II. Why he didn't tell me thank you for my attempt to have service. You know what I'm saying? I tried to join. So you should have told me thank you for your attempt. What is an allocated bourbon? That's just a bourbon that's allocated for a certain store, for an actual store location, not Winn-Dixie. This would be allocated to Winn-Dixie only, but I mean to a specific Winn-Dixie, like Winn-Dixie store number 25 allocated. They made a barrel pick. It's a gimmick kind of thing to make you pay more for basically the same thing, but people love to do that, you know, because it'll have like a little medallion on it, you know. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that's what it is, you know. It's making something that's ordinary seem special. And these do not taste special. They don't taste bad, but they just taste so regular, you know. And I'm glad because I paid a regular price. I paid $15.99. I did pay $15.99. So I paid the sales price also, but it was a year ago, I think, when they had another sale previous. Corn, a little shade of charred oak, sweet honeysuckle nectar, all the regular bourbon flavors, but just very watered down, 80 proof. It's just kind of, you know, regular. Well, that's what it is. Okay. A little bit more charred oak here, and it's dry. It's like dry oak. Like the oak is so dry. Of course, it wasn't dry because they had liquor in it. It was wet. But no, I mean, but you know, it was like the wood was really dry before they added the unaged corn distillate. Now, does it have rye whiskey in it? Most likely. Does it have single malt, you know, what they call in Scotland, malted barley whiskey in it? Yes, most likely. But they are at least 51% corn, both of these. And knowing these, they're so inexpensive, they're probably 80% corn. Theoretically, bourbon could be 100% corn. But usually that's not the case. Usually they're adding a little rye, a little malted barley. Sometimes instead of malted barley, they'll add wheat or both, whatever, you know. However they want to construct, it's up to them. I heard allocated bourbons were expensive. They usually are more expensive because you get a little medallion. All right. I'm not here to criticize that practice. I'm just saying that's what it is. Okay, this one tastes a little less exciting. And I think this is the Winn-Dixie. So I think the Bellows wins, and it is aged an extra year, so that does make a difference. So it's a year older, 4 years versus 3. This is a little younger. This is about as basic as it comes. It's got a very basic label. It's got a very basic price, a very basic plastic bottle, and so forth. And I got it right. So good. That's a good start, right? When you start off with a win. One win, 0 losses. So I'm starting off 1-0 and hope to continue that. Okay. I've got some other ones like Jesse James bourbon, which is at least bottled in California. It just says American bourbon. So they could be buying bourbons from Kentucky, Indiana. I don't know if they make any bourbon in California, but probably they do. Probably they do, and I never heard of it. They make some bourbon in Louisiana. It's not famous. It's not well known, but they make it. I never bought it because the price was outrageous. They even make rice whiskey in Louisiana. Wouldn't know what that would taste like. Probably rice. Not to be cheeky or smart aleck. I'm not trying to be. But that price is not so nice either. So I haven't really, but I don't want to get hung up in that, rice whiskey. Or there's such a thing called bourbon snobs. You know the answer before you ask the question. You knew the answer before you asked the question. All right. So Bellows wins, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye, everybody.